I think it is about making work more attractive, making it, seem like something that someone wants to do. Because, there is value in going to work and having work that you believe in. But unfortunately, for too many people, work is not enjoyable. It's not pleasant. I think there was a survey out last year saying about 30% of people think their jobs are absolutely meaningless. And for them, give them one day off, just give them an extra day off and it might be a bit better.
Joe, how would you like to introduce yourself?
In terms of my title?
Yeah.
So we've just changed name to the 4 Day Week Foundation. So I'm officially the campaign director of the 4 Day Week Foundation.
You're now the foundation. You weren't the foundation before.
We've been the 4 Day Week campaign for the last few years.
And now you're established.
We just become the 4 Day Week Foundation, kind of in recognition of the progress that's been made, but also kind of gives a clear idea of what we do as an organisation, because we're not just campaigning, we also practically support companies to implement the 4 Day week as well.
Well, tell me about those achievements. What's happened this week?
Yeah, so we've been campaigning quite solidly for a 4 Day working week for the last few years, since the COVID pandemic, which obviously kind of upended the world of work. And this week we've hit 200 companies in the UK that have permanently accredited with us. They've adopted a 4 Day working week with no loss of pay for workers. And just to be really clear about how we define a 4 Day week, we say a 4 day, 32-hour working week with no loss of pay. So it's reducing working hours is the key part there. And we know there's hundreds more that have done it, but they're the ones that are accredited with us. So it is a bit of a milestone. And I think we're feeling really proud that, this is something that the UK is leading the way on. This is an issue a rare issue where the UK is leading the way on kind of more progressive workplace rights. So we're feeling pretty pleased this weekend. All the media response has been great as well.
How do you convince a company to give up 5 hours give or take, of working time every week?
Yeah. So, I do understand that, on the face of it, it can seem counterintuitive, that working less hours would produce kind of better results for your company. But actually, all the evidence now does show that, not just in the UK, but across Europe, that when workers are better rested, when they have a better work-life balance, what we've seen is productivity is at least maintained, but in many cases even improved. And, I feel that as well, working 4 days a week. You have that 3-day weekend, you come back in on a Monday morning refreshed, motivated, and you do generally perform better.
So it's a productivity thing. That's how you sell it.
I think that's the biggest selling points of businesses. Also, in terms of job recruitment, job retention, really big thing you can offer to workers. Reduction in sickness absences. Many of the companies we've accredited have actually found profits have gone up since they've moved to a 4 day working week.
Really?
So that seems to be a win-win for both the workers and the employers.
How do you it's very difficult to sell now, I think, because the one council that decided that they would like to do a 4 day working week, it was all over the papers. It was a media frenzy. It was, look at these lazy council workers, these lazy civil servants who don't want to get out of bed on a Friday. Do you think that has... Well, actually, first tell me, has there been progress in that council? And secondly, how do you now sell that onto businesses so they're not going to be painted in that same light? Yeah.
So despite some of the controversy we've seen in the media, that first ever trial at a UK council has been very successful. It's been going for a year and a half now, and they're just consulting on making it permanent. And they found that, not only is the well-being of workers improved, people are much happier, also the key metrics that the council use to measure their performance have gone up. So planning applications are being made quicker, calls set, the kind of contact centres handling calls much more quickly, much more efficiently. So actually, council taxpayers are getting a better service, and they've actually saved taxpayers money as well. They've saved £400,000 through being able to recruit and retain staff, whereas in the past they were spending millions and millions on agency staff to fill those gaps. They've actually saved money. So the kind of irony is that they've actually saved taxpayers money. So
it's a draw for people, which is that's such an obvious question, but is it a draw for people?
Yeah, massively. And I think there was a huge survey out last week looking across the whole of Europe and workers' kind of preferences, and for the first time, work-life balance has gotten ahead of pay. Work-life balance is what people are looking for now, and I think that's a post-COVID trend. And what we've seen is the early pioneers of this, the early kind of hundreds and hundreds of businesses that have done it, they're really reaping the rewards. And we would urge, business leaders who are on the fence to start thinking about embracing this, because it can be a win-win, for the employer as well as the worker.
Do you think it's fair is a difficult word to use, I think, but is it fair that, say, white-collar workers might be able to take up this scheme, but if you are, say, a nurse or you're a bus driver, you you might not be able to because you're required to be at work for a certain number of hours a week?
It's certainly easier to implement in some sectors, but what we found, and we've been pleasantly surprised, is working with companies across kind of manufacturing sectors, retail, hospitality. We had a fish and chip shop and a brewery took part in one of our big trials. They've managed to make it work, and sometimes they've had to be a bit more creative, but they have managed to make it work. And if we think about artificial intelligence, AI, some of these new technologies coming in, which again are making us more productive in the workplace, then surely we should be getting less working hours. If we're more productive in the workplace, then workers should be benefiting through less working hours. And that hasn't happened because actually, I don't know if you're aware, but since the 1980s, working hours, the kind of reduction in working hours has stalled. So we're basically working the exact same amount of working hours we were in the 1980s, which is, we would argue, is ridiculous given all the productivity gains in the economy since then.
So companies are getting more out of us.
Yeah,
is that what you mean?
Where those benefits are largely going is to greater company profits, unfortunately.
Wow. So that's going to radicalise me, that is. How does this tally with Rachel Reeves today has given this big speech about growth? I mean, that means this could have been filmed any day in the past 6 months. Her argument is that Britain is stagnant and that she needs to get the economy moving. People need to be at work. How will this scheme tally with that sort of rhetoric?
I think the problem the government have got is they're just using the same old failed methods of the past. And if we look at across Europe, the UK already works on the longest full-time working hours in Europe. And at the same time, we also have one of the least productive economies. So what that suggests is that all these really long working hours we're doing, and we do have an unhealthy culture, I think, in Britain where we are addicted to work. It's not producing good results for the economy, and it's certainly not producing good results for workers. And so we think, something's got to change. If you look at what the government have been fixating on is these 3 million workers who are long-term sick. I think that's related to our work culture, and that's got to change. And it has been 100 years since we moved from a 6-day working week to a 5-day working week. It's a very long time. And I think we've got to remember this 9 to 5 5-day working week model was designed for a more kind of industrial agricultural economy we had 100 years ago. And so we're saying we're long overdue an update to working hours, and I do think this current government are looking at the wrong solutions.
It's really interesting. So that this huge quote-unquote problem that the government talks about all the time about people being off sick for too long or out of work for too long, you think that could be resolved by a reduction in working hours?
Definitely. I think we've got to make work more attractive if we want to get people back into the workplace. One of those solutions will be a 4-day working week or a shorter working week. There's probably other solutions as well, but I think that's a big part of it. And if you look at the younger generations coming through now, Gen Z, some people call them, all the surveys suggest they do not want to be working 5 days a week. And I think, sadly, that's probably partly a result to wider societal trends. If you're a young person today, it's very hard to get on the housing ladder. You go to university, you've got 50 grand worth of debt. All the youth centres have closed down. And you're saying, well, I'm not going to slog my guts out 5 days a week for that quality of life. And I think there is that shift now where younger people, my generation and below, are saying, we don't want to work in the same way that our parents' generations, our grandparents' generations have worked. We don't want to work to dominate our lives in that same way. So there is a real generational shift happening, which I think is exciting. I think it's a long time coming.
And their parents' generation as well probably are working less of a working week anyway, because they might be working from home a couple of days, or they might be in a more privileged position where they can take a day off here and there because they are at a more senior level.
Yeah, and working from home has been a big part of it. And I think there's a whole agenda now, isn't there? Flexible working from home, 4-day working week. I think it's all linked. What it's all about is workers want more freedom, more autonomy from work. And, I've felt that from being in the workplace from, 16, 17, that 5 days of your 7 days at work is too much. 4 out of 7 is a much better balance. And, I've been doing it for 5 years. It is a much better way of living. I can attest to that.
Have you had any construction companies or manufacturing companies want to sign up?
Yeah, so there's about 12 manufacturing construction companies signed up for representing those 200 companies. And we've worked quite closely with some of those manufacturing companies who have kind of rejigged the way they kind of work on the factory floor, used new technology, shared skills amongst wider staff. They've been creative, and maybe it's taken more work, but they have managed to make it work. And they've also made savings. If you can close the factory on the 5th day, then there's huge savings in energy cost as well. There are benefits, and they'll be different in each sector. And we've never said a 4-day working week can come in overnight for everyone. There's got to be a transition to get there. It took the best part of a decade or even 2 decades to switch from a 6-day week to a 5-day week. But we do think we're hopeful that within a decade we can get to a place where a 4-day working week starts to become the normal way of working across the economy. That's the hope.
Can you imagine a point in time where the Labour government perhaps adopts it, even as a mandate, maybe?
We hope so. I mean, we have been talking to them. They are open-minded on it, and they've recognised that councils are allowed to trial 4-day working weeks. We had some trouble with the previous government who were trying to block that. So they're not kind of proactively trying to bring in a 4-day week, but they're kind of seem a bit open-minded on it. So I think, if we can keep making the business case and keep showing more and more that it does work for businesses as well as workers, and hopefully in the long run we can bring Labour around, because honestly I think Labour are desperate for some radical, hopeful ideas at the moment. There's a real misery that's come in across the country these last 6 months since they got into government, unfortunately, because I think people were expecting more, expecting something different, and it largely looks like more of the same. And so I do think that they are in real trouble already. And if another year goes by, 2 years go by, then maybe they're looking around for some more radical, hopeful ideas. And we've done a lot of work on a 4-day working week. It's come a long way. There's a lot of momentum behind it. So we'd hope that they could come on board at some point.
It's interesting how anti 4-day working week or anti work from home the last government was under the under the Conservatives.
Well, you had Jacob Rees-Mogg putting post-it notes on civil servants' desks.
Yeah,
but it's very old-fashioned. I think the Conservatives and some unfortunately some of the Labour Party are very stuck in the past on this. It's very kind of this assumption that working really long hours creates productivity, working hard. And it doesn't. And the conversations we've had with businesses are much more around being, focusing on outputs when you're working, actually what are you trying to achieve in the workplace? There's so much presenteeism in the British workplace. We've all probably been in jobs in our life where we're sort of sitting around pretending to work.
Yeah.
I don't think that's good for anyone. I don't think that's good for any company. It's definitely not good on a mental well-being level. And I guess that's the other part of it, is that the kind of statistics around mental health issues related to work are all on the rise. Mental health related, work related mental health, depression, anxiety, all on the rise. So there is a burnout culture in Britain, and hopefully we're starting to reverse that, or at least have a conversation about reversing that.
Well, do you think anyone in government has made that connection between we've got people off sick, we've got a high number of people who are experiencing mental health difficulties or are on prescriptions for mental health issues or are signed off? Has there been a connection made that this might be something to do with our work-life balance?
I've certainly not seen it. It seems to be the same old solutions. We're going to crack down on benefits. We're going to make your life harder. I don't think that's what people want to hear if they were long-term sick with mental health issues. I think it is about making work more attractive, making it, seem like something that someone wants to do. Because, there is value in going to work and having work that you believe in. But unfortunately for too many people, work is not enjoyable. It's not pleasant. I think there was a survey out last year saying about 30% of people think their jobs are absolutely meaningless. And for them, give them one day off. Just give them an extra day off and it might be a bit better.